Okay, it's Friday after school. I'm going to go ahead and read Chapter 2 in case anybody is trying to keep up in the audio version of The Secret of Sarah Revere by Anne Rinaldi. I invited him in and sat him down. I gave him cider. "How can I help you, Reverend?" Out of his haversack, he took ink, a quill pen, and paper, all of which he spread on a table. "Do you know aught about your father's ride?" he asked again. "Which ride? He took many." "Don't play with me, child. The ride that is on everyone's tongue these days. Isn't that the way of it, though? My father made at least 5 journeys to New York and Philadelphia in the last 2 years, Reverend. No one came around asking about them. None were like the ride to Lexington. They led up to it. Be that as it may, your father is famous now. Everyone wants to know about him." "Famous, is he? If he could see my father in that back room, the heat and flies coming in the window, copper plates all about, the smell of ink so pungent, the floor full of grimy sand and bits of paper, him wiping the sweat from his eyes as he lowers the platen on the press, tightens the screws and swears because the paper for the last batch of money cost $6 a ream when it was worth only 4. My father does not consider himself famous. Miserable, yes, but not famous. Tell me how he rode out of Boston that night to Lexington." "There was no more riding out of Boston by that time. He was a wanted man. He had to sneak out and take a small boat across the Charles." "Ah, yes," he wrote feverishly as if my words were jewels to be cherished. I became angry. What right did he have to walk in here and think he could hear all this just for the asking, so he could write it down and make sense of it when none of us in this house yet could? "Tell me, what is it like to be the daughter of Paul Revere?" he said. Dear God, was he daft? "Do you hear the guns, Reverend?" "Yes. People are dying. Good people, and my father helped start the fighting." He stopped writing. He looked at me as if I had uncommon powers. "He and his friends started this war, and we don't know yet if the other colonies are in this fight with us, or if we are in it alone. But there is no turning back." He stared at me with watery blue fish eyes. "You must not take this upon yourself, child. What is happening today has been coming on for years." "My father has been part of it for years. It is not something he takes lightly." He sighed and nodded. "Tell me your recollections." "My recollections are my own." "No, child, they belong to the world now. You owe the telling." "Indeed. And was I to be left with nothing then? What of my feelings?" Very well, I decided I would tell him things, but I would confuse him. And so I started telling. "I was a child when my father started his political nonsense. That's when my own dead mama called it. I recollect him coming in with a suit all over his face after a night out with the sons. It was part of our lives, I can tell you that." He commenced writing again. "I can tell you how my stepmother Rachel came to us, and how we needed her to be a family again after my mother died, and how my father's work for the Sons of Liberty in the Provincial Congress near ruined all that." "Yes, talk to me of this, child." "God help me, I told the man everything but what he wanted to know. I told him about grandmother and her vile moods, and how my sister, the first Mary, was born under the smallpox flag and died a year later, and how my sister Asana died, and mother was buried under a tombstone with a skull and crossbones on it." He wrote it down, all of it. I told him how the British made a ditty about my father and Dr. Warren after they threw the tea off the ships, and how my father made teeth for Dr. Warren this spring, 2 made out of 1 piece of ivory and held in place with wire. 1 was an eye tooth. He wrote furiously. I told him how my brother Paul left North Riding School and went to work in father's shop, and how he was left behind in Boston to keep the house and shop in order. "Paul's 15, and he's there all alone. He had to turn 2 muskets over to the king's men," I said. The Reverend was beginning to look confused. "Good," I thought. "It serves you right for thinking. I will tell you what you want to know just for the asking. Ruffles, our dog, followed my father to the boat that last night in Boston when he made his ride. Paul and I had to go and get Ruffles." He put it down. "My father tied rags around the oars of the boat that took him across the Charles that night to muffle the sound, and they rode right under the HMS Somerset in the harbor. She's got 64 guns and is a great ship of the line." He wrote that too. That pleased him. He smiled. "My sister Debbie is the beautiful one, but she has marks on her face from the pox. I don't, but I'm not beautiful either. My grandmother favors Debbie, and I think grandmother hates me a little bit because I didn't get pox marks. Debbie is her favorite, being named after her, you see." He scribbled. "My mama died hard. What will happen to my children?" she asked everyone. I was there when she asked it. The wives of my father's friends in the Masons and the North Caucasus and the Sons would never have anything to do with her. They thought of themselves of a higher order, those wives. He nodded, but he did not mark down. This was not what he wanted from me. I pondered if I should tell him about Billy Dawes, who rode with my father that night, and how Billy sneaked back into Boston afterward, every Saturday for weeks. And his sister in Boston covered gold pieces with cloth and sewed them on his coat as buttons, so he could smuggle money out. No, I decided I must protect Billy Dawes. What else will you have me tell you, Reverend? The poor man looked addled. He commenced to speak. Then the cannon started up again, and he fell silent, though his lips moved as if in prayer. I minded that he was praying for those poor souls on the hill. When the cannon stopped, he smiled. Child, all you have said is interesting, but I would ask you one question. I nodded. Did your father ever say who fired the first shot at Lexington? The first shot? Yeah, he was there. He was running across Lexington Common with John Hancock's trunk of important papers. Mr. Lowell was helping him. They were taking it into the woods. I heard that story. Some say he turned and saw who fired the first shot. I don't know, Reverend. I never heard tell. Did he say why his deposition was returned to him by Whig leaders? Because he wrote in it how he near attacked a British patrol. They did not want such information going to England. They did not want England to think we started this thing. Some people think your father knows who fired the first shot, he persisted. It's not what people think that matters, Reverend. It's not what people think that matters, Reverend. It's what's true. He saw I was not about to be pushed. Do you have anything else to tell me? I thought for a moment. Yes, and it's very sad. He waited. The horse my father rode that night was named Brown Beauty. She belonged to a man named Larkin in Charleston. She was a fine horse, sure of foot and swift, great of heart. The British took her from father that night. A British grenadier rode her. He was a heavy man, and she was already spent. My father thinks this British man rode her to death, killed her. I'm sorry, he said, and then he gathered together his things. Have you ever asked your father outright if he saw who fired the first shot? No, sir. You might want to do that sometime, Sarah Revere. Then he got to his feet. Oh, by the way, tell your father that General Gage has booked passage on the Charming Nancy for his wife. He is sending her to England. That brought me up short. Margaret, to England? But she's American, I said. Why would he do that? Because someone told Dr. Warren about Gage's plan to march on Concord last April for the military stores. There are those who think that someone was Gage's own wife. Margaret Gage. Fancy that. And then I stood stock still, taken by a thought. It was something Rachel had said when we were coming out of Boston last month. We were stopped at the British sentry post, and there we met her friendly Lady Franklin coming back in. What have we wrought, Lady Franklin? Asked Rachel. We are in part responsible, you and I, Rachel. Are you sorry? No, Rachel had answered. We did what was right to do, but I fear for Margaret. I couldn't think. Too many thoughts were crowding my mind. I must go somewhere and be alone to ponder it. Did you know Mrs. Gage? He was asking. No, sir, I only knew of her. He nodded slowly, thanked me, and I saw him out the door. I stood watching him down the path, and then I poured myself a glass of cold cider, picking up a shirt I was working on for my father, and I went out back through the kitchen garden. There was an arbor at the end with a bench, and I oftentimes went there of an afternoon to do my sewing when the house became too crowded for me. We lived with so many people now. Henry Knox and his wife, Lucy, and the cooks. It's a large house, but just as crowded as we were at home in Boston. I sat down in the coolness. Rachel will wake soon, I told myself, and then I will tell her what I heard about Margaret Gage. Rachel will want to know. I must tell her. Oh, God, Rachel! I can scarce form that question in my mind. Was it Margaret Gage, then, who informed Dr. Warren? And is this what Rachel and Lady Franklin felt so responsible for? That if she hadn't informed him, there would have been no fight at Lexington, and now no war? Rachel, think of it. So close to Dr. Warren. Was this the reason? Or was it because what was between Rachel and Warren was more than friendship? How am I to know? Is anything to be made clear to me? There are too many secrets in this family. I recollect the night Rachel asked Dr. Warren if he would see Mrs. Gage as a patient, and the look that passed between them. Did Rachel send Mrs. Gage to him to be an informer? I will have no peace until I find out these things. And what about me? Will I be able to set right this day this terrible thing that lies between me and Dr. Warren? Before he goes to the hill? He'll go, I know he will. I must put it all together in my head and make sense of it. Before he gets here. Before Rachel wakes up. I'll do it now. I'll sit and study on it. From here I can see the front walk, can see if Dr. Warren comes by. The windows are all open. I'll hear Rachel come downstairs. I'll sit here and think on things so I know what to say to them, all of them. Oh, I wish those guns weren't so loud. I wish I didn't feel that time was growing so short. Father, what matters? What people think or what's true? I'll figure it out.